Have you ever fallen in love with the right feeling attached to the wrong person? I didn't figure it out in one dramatic moment. It came in pieces, small, quiet pieces I kept finding reasons to ignore. Because I was 35, successful, and genuinely, embarrassingly happy for the first time in my adult life. His name was Dean. For 14 months I thought he was everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Nicoletta Moretti Nica, to everyone who actually knows me. I run a commercial real estate firm out of Providence, Rhode Island, on Federal Hill, built from the ground up by my father over 30 years ago. If you've ever trusted the wrong story someone told you about themselves, stay with me and subscribe, because this one ends somewhere you won't expect. My family has done well. My father, Salvatore Moretti Sal, to everyone built the business from nothing in the 80s. I came in at 26, and we scaled it together until it became the kind of operation that would make my nonno, God rest him, look down and feel satisfied. But money was never the point in our house. Family was the point. Always family. We're Italian-American, 3 generations deep in Providence. My parents live in the same house on Atwells Avenue they bought when they got married. Sunday dinner is mandatory, non-negotiable, treated with the seriousness of a board meeting. My mother, Rosa, makes braciole from scratch every week, the way her mother taught her. And if you don't take a second helping, she takes it personally. My Uncle Frankie lives 10 minutes away and has never once in his life needed an invitation to walk through our door. We are loud, we are close, and we do not do things halfway. So when I tell you I met Dean at a fundraiser downtown, and within 3 months I was completely gone over him, understand what that means coming from me. I don't fall fast. I don't fall easy. Dean felt different from the first night. He walked into that fundraiser in a suit that fit like it was tailored that afternoon, laughed at my Uncle Frankie's terrible joke about Sunday gravy within 5 minutes of meeting him, then turned to my mother and genuinely asked about the recipe for the arancini she'd just eaten. My mother grabbed his arm and talked to him for 45 minutes. I stood there thinking, oh, so this is how it happens. We dated 14 months. He met my family early. By month 2, he was at Sunday dinner. By month 4, he knew which chair was Uncle Frankie's and never sat in it. My family absorbed him the way Italian families absorb people they like completely, immediately, with a lot of food involved. He proposed on the rooftop of a hotel downtown on a Tuesday evening in late spring. Ring, flowers, the whole thing. I said yes before he finished asking. My mother cried when I called her. My father said, good. Now bring him to every Sunday so your mother can feed him properly. Uncle Frankie somehow already knew. I was happy, genuinely, completely happy, and I had absolutely no idea what he was hiding. Here's the thing about Dean I want you to understand before anything else. He wasn't cold. He wasn't distant. He was warm and funny, and made me feel exactly where I was supposed to be. So when the topic of his family came up, and it came up early, because in my world family comes up immediately, his answer didn't feel like a lie. It felt like a wound. My parents and I don't have a relationship, he told me 6 weeks in, on the couch in his apartment downtown, takeout containers between us. They were really controlling growing up, critical, my dad especially. I had to put distance between us just to function as an adult. I even go by a different last name to get some breathing room. I looked at him. He wasn't performing it. His eyes were steady, a little tired, like someone recounting something they'd processed a long time ago. I'm sorry, I said. Because what else do you say? It's okay. They won't be at the wedding. I need you to be okay with that. I told him I was okay with it, and I was because I trusted him, because he'd given me zero reason not to. What I didn't account for was my family. Not that they were hostile toward Dean, not even close, but the Morettis operate on a specific frequency of bone-deep need to know the people connected to the people they love. Not nosiness, not judgment. Just, you understand a person better when you understand what table they grew up sitting at. By month 11 of our engagement, the silence around Dean's family had started making its own kind of noise. My mother had made braciole, the real version, the one that takes most of Saturday. We were all around the table on Atwells Avenue, me, Dean, my parents, Uncle Frankie, my cousin Sophia, and her husband. Everything was warm and normal until Uncle Frankie, operating with his usual complete disregard for social timing, put down his fork. Dean, sweetheart, I gotta ask you something. Where are your people? The table went quiet the way tables go quiet when someone finally says the thing everyone's been carefully not saying. My parents and I aren't in contact, Dean said. I've mentioned that. I know you mentioned it. I'm asking about it. Frankie, my father's voice. One low word. Frankie picked up his fork. But the question was already on the table, and no amount of braciole was going to bury it. Later, after Dean had gone home, my father found me in the kitchen, poured a small glass of wine, leaned against the counter. He's a good man, he said, not a question. He is. I believe you. But Nico, we're going to stand in a church. We're going to make promises in front of God and everyone we know, and we're going to do it without knowing a single person from his side. His parents were controlling, Pop. He had a heart. I hear you. I believe him. He set the glass down. But controlling people still exist somewhere. They have an address. He looked at me steadily. I'm not asking you to fix anything. I'm asking you to know what you're walking into. I didn't say anything. He patted my shoulder and went back to the dining room. I still wasn't suspicious of Dean. If anything, I was worried about myself. The thought that kept surfacing on the drive home was, what if his parents look at me and decide I'm not what they wanted? Finding Dean's parents didn't take a private investigator, just a routine piece of administrative boredom. By month 11, Dean had moved into a condo my firm managed downtown. Our legal team needed him to formally sign the master lease for tax purposes. I glanced at the state ID he'd uploaded to the portal. Dean Walter Kowalski. Not Ashworth, the name he used socially, the name he'd introduced to my friends. Kowalski. Out of pure idle curiosity, I ran a quick search. A few clicks led to an old public record, a dormant social media profile untouched since college, and a primary address on Route 14 in Craftsbury, Vermont. I told Dean I had a property walkthrough. He kissed me goodbye without looking up from his laptop. The drive up was mostly me rehearsing introductions in my head, quietly dreading the moment someone opened a door and looked at me like I wasn't what they had in mind. I got off the highway into Craftsbury just before 10 in the morning. Rolling green hills, a dairy barn, a mailbox shaped like a cow. I followed the GPS to a modest white farmhouse with a hand-painted sign Kowalski Dairy and a man in a flannel shirt and mud boots hauling a feed bucket across the yard. This is not what I pictured. I sat in the car 5 full minutes recalibrating everything. No gate, no luxury car, no indication whatsoever that the people inside this house had ever spent a single moment worrying about whether someone else was good enough for anything. I got out, walked up the gravel drive. He noticed me about 10 feet away and squinted, cautious. Help you with something? Sir, you don't know me. My name is Nicoletta Moretti. I'm engaged to your son, Dean. Walt Kowalski set the feed bucket down slowly, not dropped, set down, and his face did something I was completely unprepared for. It crumbled, not with anger, with relief, with 2 years of accumulated grief finally finding somewhere to land. Carol, his voice broke on her name. Carol, come out here. Everything I thought I knew about Dean began coming apart, quietly. Over coffee I didn't ask for, and a plate of oatmeal cookies Carol put out with shaking hands. The house was clean and modest and completely filled with Dean School photos, a prom picture on the mantel, a college graduation portrait where Walt and Carol stood on either side of him, beaming, Walt's arm around his shoulders. These were not the faces of controlling, cruel people. These were the faces of parents who missed their son. The story came out carefully. Walt had run the family dairy farm his whole life. Carol had taught elementary school in town. They'd helped put Dean through business school. No debt, deeply proud of it. When Dean moved to Providence and started building his corporate life, things changed slowly. Calls got shorter. Visits stopped. He started appearing in photos online under a different last name, Ashworth, his mother's maiden name, at events with people Walt and Carol didn't recognize, being a version of himself they didn't quite recognize either. Then came the wedding conversation, the $100,000 ask. Walt's heartbroken counteroffer of $15,000 everything they could give without touching the farm's future. Dean's response, if you can't invest in my future, you're not part of it. Blocked that same night. Carol slid something across the table of a birthday card, sealed, unopened, stamped return to sender in red. Dean's handwriting on the return address label, our address. I stared at the red stamp, then pulled out my phone. I opened the text Dean had sent me the previous evening. Babe, great news. I reached out to my parents. They finally apologized and want to meet you for lunch tomorrow. I'm so excited for you to finally meet them. The kitchen was very quiet. Walt and Carol were sitting across from me, completely unaware of the digital reality their son was constructing in real time. I turned the phone around and showed them the screen. Before I left, Carol pulled one more thing from a drawer, an old family photo album, and tucked in the back a yellowed newspaper clipping from decades earlier about the old Ashworth estate outside town, the one Dean's mother's family had once worked for as tenant farmers, generations back. Funny, Carol said, almost to herself. He picked his fancy name from the family that used to sign his own grandmother's paychecks. I didn't think much of it then. It would come back to me later, in Providence, when I mentioned it in passing to my father, who went very quiet and said his own father had done seasonal groundskeeping for an old Providence family by that same name, 3 generations back. Small world, wound the same way twice. I didn't confront Dean that night. That matters. I pulled into our parking garage a little past 2, sat in the car 10 full minutes and made a deliberate decision. Not yet. My father taught me something about the moment right before a confrontation that most people get wrong. The person who reacts first almost never wins, he told me once. Let them finish the lie. A half-told lie is just an argument. A fully told lie is a confession. I rode the elevator up. Dean was on the couch, wine in hand, laptop open to a venue website. He looked up and smiled the way he always did. How was the walkthrough? Promising. Long drive, though. You want me to order something? I want you to explain why your mother's birthday card is sitting in a drawer in Craftsbury with our return address stamped on it and red. Sure, I said. Whatever you're in the mood for. I sat down next to him. He leaned his head on my shoulder, went back to venue photos. I looked at the screen without seeing any of it. Completely normal on the outside, completely dismantling everything on the inside. That night, I built a timeline the way I do with a complicated deal, separated what I knew from what I assumed. What I knew, Dean's real name was Kowalski. His parents were alive, present, heartbroken, and had never been controlling by any measure a single photograph in that house suggested. They'd offered $15,000 and been erased the same night. What I also knew, Dean had texted me while I sat in his parents' kitchen, saying those same parents wanted to meet me for lunch, which meant he was already building the next floor of the lie, which meant there was a next floor, which meant there was someone he planned to bring to that lunch. Who? Over the next few days, I paid attention differently, not suspiciously, just carefully. I noticed he mentioned his boss, a man named Preston Kensington, more than he ever had before, casually. Preston thinks the Hargrove account will close early. Margot was at that same fundraiser, apparently. Small mentions, the kind of thing a person drops into conversation to make someone feel familiar with a name before that name becomes important. He was warming me up to them. He'd been doing it for weeks, and I hadn't noticed. I looked Preston Kensington up from my office Tuesday morning, door closed. Senior vice president at a wealth management firm downtown. His photo showed a man in his late 50s, silver-haired, effortlessly confident. His wife, Margot, appeared in a society column from a charitable gala 2 years prior. Polished, poised, exactly the kind of couple you'd want standing beside you if you were trying to convince a traditional Italian family that you came from somewhere impressive. I sat back and understood something. Dean wasn't just a con artist. He was trapped in a prison of his own insecurity. He'd spent a decade reinventing himself, tailoring an identity to climb a ladder my family didn't care about, but his corporate world did. When his real father refused to fund a day of theater, it wasn't just a financial disagreement to him. It was a threat to the whole polished illusion he'd sacrificed everything for. To keep it alive, he didn't just walk away from his parents. He had to erase them. 2 days later, at a firm dinner I attended with Dean, I found myself seated beside a woman named Julia Preston and Margot Kensington's own adult daughter, estranged from her parents for reasons of her own. They're mostly out of obligation. When Dean's name came up, something shifted in her face. He's charming, she said carefully over her wine. My parents love him. He's very good at making people feel like family fast. A pause. He did the exact same thing with a woman named Claire 2 years ago, Boston. Called my parents her honorary family for about 3 months before her engagement fell apart. Nobody ever really asked why. I sat very still. This wasn't improvisation. This was a script Dean had run before, on someone else, with, as far as I could tell, the very same players. Why are you telling me this? She looked at her parents across the room, laughing warmly at something Dean had said. Because somebody should have told her. Thursday morning, my phone buzzed with a reminder Dean had added to our shared calendar. Lunch, Preston and Margot. Saturday, 12:30. Underneath, can't wait for you to finally meet them, babe. This means everything to me. I stared at that note a long time. I thought about Carol pressing a sealed birthday card across the kitchen table. I thought about Walt's face crumbling over a feed bucket. Yeah, I'll bet it does. I called my father from the car. I need to talk to you. Come to the house. 20 minutes later, I laid it all out at the kitchen table on Atwells Avenue, Craftsbury. Walt and Carol, the birthday card, the text. Preston and Margot Kensington, Julia's warning. My father listened without a single interruption. When I finished, he said 4 words. What do you need? I need to go to this lunch. I need to build something bigger. And the Kowalskis? I'm going back to Vermont. I want to know if they're willing to be a part of what comes next. And what comes next? A dinner, I said. A real one, with the right people in the room. My father stood, straightened his jacket. I'll talk to your mother about the restaurant. My mother, who'd been listening from the next room, which in our house isn't eavesdropping, it's just being present, came in with her arms crossed and the specific fury of an Italian mother who has fed someone bracioli in her house and been lied to. He ate my food, Nika, in my house. She looked at me a long moment, then put both hands on my face. You fixed this, she said quietly. Not just for you, for them. On a hunch, I asked a friend who worked in finance to quietly check Preston Kensington's professional standing before the dinner. What came back stopped me for a moment. Preston was reportedly under a preliminary state securities inquiry, nothing public yet, but enough that Julia had mentioned her father seemed unusually tense lately, and enough that my friend said off the record, if I were you, I wouldn't want my name anywhere near his by the fall. Dean, of course, had no idea. He'd tied his entire fabricated lineage to a man whose own polished reputation was already quietly cracking. It wouldn't change what I was doing, but it told me something about the kind of foundation Dean had chosen to build his lie on, impressive on the surface, unstable underneath, exactly like the man himself. The lunch happened at an old money restaurant on the east side, the kind of place where the lighting makes everyone look slightly more important than they are. Dean arrived with Preston and Margot, one hand looped through Preston's arm, glowing. This is my dad, Preston, and my mom, Margot, Dean said. Not Walt, not Carol, Preston, Margot. I shook both hands. I've heard so much about you. I had heard nothing about them, because they hadn't existed in this role until roughly a week ago. For 20 minutes I watched Dean perform with a fluency that, under any other circumstances, I'd have found genuinely impressive. Margot tracked along carefully, working from a script she'd only half memorized. Preston was smoother, asked me about the business, made appropriate comments about the Providence market, like a man determined to be convincing. Preston, I said, setting my fork down, Dean's told me so much about you. You've clearly been a huge presence in his life. He's been like family to us, Preston said. Like family. There it is. That means everything, I said, looking at Dean when I said it. He beamed. Keep smiling. I'll be honest with you both, I continued. My family is traditional Italian on my father's side. We take the formal stuff seriously. My parents would never forgive me if we didn't do this properly. We'd love to host an engagement dinner next Saturday. Family, a good meal, a toast. My parents just need to welcome the people who matter to Dean before we get to the altar. Preston glanced at Margot. Half a second of silent calculation. We'd be honored. Dean grabbed my hand under the table so fast I felt it in my shoulder. The trap was already built. He just walked into it, smiling. Monday, I drove back to Craftsbury. Walt opened the door before I finished knocking. Same kitchen, same coffee. I told them everything, the lunch, the Kensingtons, the engagement dinner I'd arranged. I told them I wanted them there. Carol's hands went still around her mug. Nika, we don't want to make a scene. My mother is going to stand at a church and welcome whoever walks through those doors into our family. She deserves to know who that actually is. I paused. And you've spent 2 years sending birthday cards that came back unopened. You deserve to be in that room, not for drama, just because somebody needs to say the truth out loud. Walt covered Carol's hand with his. What time should we be there? My father handled the restaurant Locanda di Napoli, downtown, a place that felt like someone's home, not a stage. My mother handled the menu personally and added a small frame photo of my nonno and nonna to the welcome table, because they should be there too. Uncle Frankie's only request was a double portion of tiramisu before anyone else sat down, and to be the one holding the door on the way out. I gave him both. Walt called me Thursday night to confirm. At the end of the call, quiet. Nico, whatever happens in that room tomorrow, Thank you for knocking on that door. A pause. He picked a good one, even if he doesn't know it yet. Locanda di Napoli on a Saturday evening, warm, full garlic and rosemary, meeting you at the door. The private dining room in back was quieter, intentional white linen, low light, round tables where everyone could see everyone else. They arrived at 7. Dean first, navy dress on me long forgotten, in memory of that night, every detail exactly right. Preston followed, silver-haired, easy authority. Margot beside him, pearls at her collarbone. Dean moved through that room like he owned it, kissed my mother on both cheeks, shook my father's hand with both of his, leaned close to me. This is perfect. Your family is incredible. This is everything I wanted. I know, I said. That's why I did it. He heard a compliment. I meant something else entirely. We sat. The food came branzino, veal, fresh bread wrapped in cloth. Preston was smooth and engaged with my father. Margot complimented my mother on the restaurant. Dean was glowing, relaxed, victorious. At 7:48, in the lull between courses, I slipped my phone out and typed one word to Walt. Now. Then I stood, tapped a knife against a glass. The table settled. Dean looked up at me with that full radiant smile, the smile of a man who thinks the next 60 seconds are a toast about how much I love him. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, I said, my voice calm. In my family, a dinner like this is a declaration. It's us saying these people are real. These people matter. We don't do that lightly. I looked around the table. So tonight, I want to make sure we have the right people at this table. I nodded to the restaurant manager near the back wall. He walked to the side door and pushed it open. Walt and Carol Kowalski walked in. Walt in a navy blazer that didn't quite fit the way it used to, saved for occasions that mattered. Carol in a burgundy dress, chin up, moving with the quiet dignity of a woman who had decided she would not fall apart in public, no matter what happened next. Dean saw them. I was watching his face. The color left it like a tide going out fast. Complete. Absolute. Dean, his voice, thin, barely a voice at all. Wait. I turned to him. I went to Craftsbury, I said quietly, not performing for the room, talking to him. 3 weeks ago, I found a man feeding cows on Route 14. I told him my name, and he set the bucket down like his hands had forgotten how to hold anything. The room was a held breath. Your father ran that farm his whole life, Dean. Your mother taught elementary school. They helped put you through business school without $1 of debt, because they wanted you to have everything. They offered you $15,000 money from the farm's future, and you told them if they couldn't fund your life, they didn't exist. You don't understand? I sat in their kitchen, I said. I held the birthday card you mailed back unopened. And while I was sitting there, you texted me that your parents had apologized and wanted to meet me for lunch. I turned to Preston and Margot. Margot had both hands pressed flat on the table, face pale. Preston had gone still. I know exactly what he told you, I said, my voice shifting, quiet and respectful, that my family was deeply judgmental, that his real parents had passed away years ago, that he needed honorary family so he wouldn't face a traditional wedding alone. He weaponized your kindness to fill 2 empty chairs on a stage. I gestured toward Walt and Carol. Those are his real parents right there. Margot looked at Dean, a long, slow look that didn't need words, then at Walt and Carol, and something crossed her face far worse than anger recognition. Preston said nothing. He folded his napkin and set it on the table, a man who had decided there was nothing worth saying first. I turned back to Dean one final time. He'd stopped looking for the exit. There wasn't one, and he knew it. I grew up watching my father treat everyone like they mattered, I said. The man who parks the cars, the dairy farmer in Vermont who gave everything he had and got told it wasn't enough. That's the measure I was raised with. Not the address, not the last name. I looked at him. By that measure, I don't know who you are. I took the ring out of my jacket pocket and set it on the white linen. Not thrown, placed. The way you set something down when you've carried it too long and you're finally ready to put it down for good. Then I picked up the small floral centerpiece white flowers, my mother's choice, and carried it across the room to Carol Kowalski. She looked at the flowers, then at me, and came completely apart. Not loudly, the quiet kind. The kind that comes from 2 years of grief finally finding somewhere to go. Walt had his arm around her before the first sound left her. He looked at me over the top of her head and extended his free hand. I shook it. He gripped it hard, the grip of a man saying something his voice couldn't carry yet. My father was suddenly beside me. He does that, materializes when it matters. He extended his hand to Walt. "I'm Sal," he said. "I should have met you a long time ago. I'm sorry for that." Walt shook it, swallowed once. "Thank you for raising a daughter like that." My father looked at me sideways, just a second too long. In 35 years, that's the proudest I've ever seen him look. My mother didn't shake Carol's hand. She pulled her into a full embrace, both arms, unconditional, the way Italian mothers hold people who need holding. We walked out together, the Morettis and the Kowalskis, my mother's arm through Carol's. My father and Walt walking side by side with the ease of two men who just recognized something in each other. Uncle Frankie bringing up the rear, holding the door exactly as promised, pausing to look back once before he let it close. Dean was still sitting at the center of that table in his perfect suit, the ring on the linen, the centerpiece gone. Preston and Margot were already moving toward the exit at the far end of the room, not looking at him. Nobody went to him. Nobody offered a version of events that made it better, because there were no more parts left to play. Outside, the September air was cool and clean, the city moving around us like it had no idea what had just happened inside. My father put his hand on the back of my neck, the way he's done since I was small, and said the only thing he said all night. Your nonno would have done the same thing. Across the sidewalk, Walt Kowalski stood looking up at the skyline with Carol tucked under his arm, the white flowers still in her hands, both of them breathing the cool air like people who'd just been handed something back they'd given up on ever seeing again. Some deals you close for profit. Some you close because there's no version of yourself you could live with that walks away from the table. That night, I closed the most important deal of my life, and I didn't make a single dollar. If a lie is tall enough, it feels like a whole life. But the moment the right people walk through the door, every floor of it comes down at once. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life, tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories like mine, there's a link in the description.